Hey everyone, welcome back to DeFi Top Signal with my co-host Drake. And today we have a very special guest. It's Curve.Cap. This is the DeFi podcast where we talk about crypto, anything current events, Web3 alpha, macro trends, DeFi game theories, any of them out there right now, and then strong narratives, of course. And then we'll probably end it off with NFTs if we have time. So Drake, I'm gonna hand it off to you.
Dogs, what's up, guys? Well, actually, you guys can't respond, but we got Cap and Abs. Dudes, excited for this one. I hope you are excited too. But if you guys don't know who Curve Cap is, basically, he's a guy on Twitter. He's not necessarily anon. You can check him out on his YouTube channel as well. But he's one of the developers, not developers. Actually, yeah, no, he is one of the developers. He helps and codes over at Curve, and he also helps with the classic GM fam and gives updates on Curve. So is it weekly, Curve Cap?
So I used to do daily videos, and then I took a break in January. I was in Thailand and Hong Kong for the month, and because of the time zone issues, it wasn't really possible to get a video out. And since then, I've been super lazy on my videos, so I need to get back on the swing of that. But I do release a daily article on weekdays about like various goings on in Curve, DeFi, the general ecosystem, and then as you said, I also do a lot of coding work for Curve. So that's taken the form of some developer tutorials for some of the Curve heavily utilized technology like Brownie and Viper, Titanoboa, and more recently been working on a few supplemental contracts. Nothing mission critical because I'm certainly the dumbest person on the team there. But some of the kind of some of the work that needs to be done that no one else wants to do.
So, were you one of the basically one of the founders with Curve? Did you come up with the idea, or were you just coddled in by the team? What's your story?
I wish I was part of the founding team. So, if anyone's followed Curve closely, you probably have seen that kind of rainbow graph of token emissions, which
Yeah.
includes really hefty set for the founding team. So this would be like Charlie, Michael, Ben, and I think there's a fourth person I didn't quite been able to identify. And they are receiving a hefty share of Curve emission. So if I was smart enough to have been diving into DeFi a couple of years earlier, maybe I could have been so lucky. But as it stands, I'm just happy to be involved, be part of the team, and be able to like help out because I'm really passionate about DeFi and cryptocurrency, and this is like one of the best ways I found to engage with that particular community.
So what's it like working at Curve? Does the team just message you on Discord? Do they call you up or send you emails like what tasks you need to do, or do you just know what you need to do on a daily basis and just ship? Because like with a lot of these crypto projects, if they aren't really innovating or creating anything new, I mean, it's the code's there, the code runs, the code does its stuff. Does that make
So
sense?
yeah, Curve is founded by a team of all developers, and the only people they have on the team are developers. And as a result, they've sort of built this up as like a developer's utopia. By that I mean there's absolutely no meetings. My first week I tried to push someone to do a Zoom call, and I almost didn't last because of it. It's incredibly decentralized in that Charles, Michael, and Ben, all have the founding members, all happen to live in Switzerland, but they've never met each other. I don't think that's necessarily like due to any like security reasons. It's just they're developers. They want to spend their time coding, right? They don't want to like be schlepping across town for coffee meetings. A ton of activity takes place on Telegram. Everyone is in a few different Telegram chats. Like everyone generally knows what they have to be working on. People are spanning all time zones, so they kind of just ping people asynchronously as they need. But it's as a result, like everyone's like super focused and heads down on delivering and shipping code. And I like to think that it's one of the reasons that Curve has been fairly competitive amongst DeFi protocols, and that it's really releasing a lot of cool things.
So how long you been doing this?
About 2 years now.
2 years. I do have to ask this question though. So since you're on the back end and you know what ships and what rolls out on Curve, just kind of like a just a random question. If you know all that alpha and know what's going on the back end, as a team, do you guys like go together and basically, hey, look, we can't counter trade these guys, or do you guys just like sit it, forget it, don't even mess with it, just roll stuff, ship stuff out, and like to see it? And, like, do you get involved with the trading aspect of it?
No, I'm not a trader, and that's good for me because I'd probably be bankrupt if I was. Like pretty much every trade I've ever made has caused me to lose money. But like what's interesting about Curve is like if you dive into like the V2 contracts especially, there's not necessarily an easy way to counter trade it. I suppose you might be able to if there was like a, let's say, a pricing arbitrage on a centralized exchange that you had access to quickly kind of arbitrage prices there. Um, there's a fair amount of bots that do, like when curve pools get off peg, do kind of swoop in and arb those and take profits that way. But unless you're actually like operating like an arb bot, there's not a ton of ways to actually like trade the curve pools to make money. Or when it does happen, like you might look at the USDC peg the other week when USDC dropped down to like 80 some cents. Like that's an opportunity where anyone who wanted to bet on the USDC repeg could buy up some cheap USDC. But in the moment, it's not necessarily like you're looking at that thinking that could be a good trade. You might say, I might spend like $100,000 buying $110,000 worth of USDC, and then it goes to zero, and then you just lose everything. So it's one of the reasons that I don't try and trade or anything like that. But the dev chats don't even have that much in the way of alpha. It's really a lot of nitty gritty, like, can I get a approval for this GitHub pull request? Things like that.
So do you come up with any ideas for Curve, or are you just like just kind of like the guy who rolls and ships out the code? Like someone gives you an idea and you're like, okay, cool, that's great, I'll deploy it. Or are you the guy who's like, hey, I saw this thing over at this one DeFi protocol, I thought it's a really, really good idea, let's go and implement. Oh, forget it, I'm not asking you guys, I'm just doing it.
If I ever had an idea that was that good, I probably would swipe it for myself. But again, I'm the dumbest person on the team, so I just do what needs to be done.
Listen, man,
Man, your
we
team
are
your team
we are
must
the
be a bunch
dumbest
of
folks.
gigabrains.
Yeah, we're like the dumbest folks, and like Drake and I, we're the most degen dumbest people in DeFi, which is why we named this this podcast DeFi Top Signal, because every single time that we purchase something, it goes down, and so we literally buy the tops. So
Yeah, I don't know
um,
about you, but I'm not the dumb guy. I'm messing them. Hey, I
I'm
learned
definitely the
I
dumb
learned
guy.
from my mistakes, man. That's how it rolls.
That's
That
yeah.
that's the whole gig of the podcast and the whole gig of why I started my channel. Learn from me. Don't do what I do. Counter trade
No, I
me.
mean, I don't even mean it to be self-deprecating. Like, I know where I stand in the world of DeFi. Like, there are gigabrains, and then there's me, like, trying to follow all these gigabrains and see what they do. Um, and I feel like my role is like I try and learn, and when I do so in public. So basically, like, people always ask me, how do I like find stuff to write about every day? The answer is just like I'm that stupid. Like, I need to learn something new about this crypto space every single day. When I do, I jot down my notes and publish it. And thankfully, there's a lot of other people as dumb as me that also like this learning process, right?
Dude,
Yes.
I mean that's I agree to that. I mean that's what I do as well. I mean, most of the stuff I learn is just from me, like I'll be public with what I teach and what I learn. Like for example, stacks. Like it was a couple videos ago. I made a video on stacks, and mainly the basically that and Lightning were the only thing that were on Bitcoin as Bitcoin DeFi. But there actually is another one. It just doesn't have as much traction, and the marketing is not as good, and the token it's doesn't have as much utility as Stacks. Is its Root Stack or Rootstock? It's basically another chain that's on Bitcoin. So I mean, you just learn from the market and learn from people as you while you're learning and you publicly learn. You also get other people to publicly teach you. So it's kind of awesome. But yeah. So another question I want to ask you is
The whole DeFi, right? Sorry. Can
Oh,
you hear me?
no, go
absolutely.
for it. Go for it. Yeah, go.
Yeah, I was gonna say that since DeFi is so super young, it's been available for like 3 years or so. Um, I just had a quick question about the future of Curve. Like, where do you see like, is there anything that's in the pipeline for the future? Are you guys like consistently trying to build more on top of your platform, or are you just kind of, just more so security background? Like, that is that number one, because obviously no one wants to be hacked. What are your what are you working on today with Curve, if you can share that?
Yeah, of course. So it's not any real secret what the kind of biggest initiative at Curve is, which is the release of Curve USD. This is going to be the Curve stablecoin, and the design of it is super interesting. It took me, again, as the dumbest person on the team, a fair amount of time to understand the intricacies of it. But once I did, it was sort of mind-boggling, the implications of it. So the Curve USD launches hopefully soon, TM, and when it launches, it might well sort of reshape the entire kind of like foundation of Curve. In that, Curve thus far has been very dependent on the V1, V2 pools, and through these is trying to build out the kind of most efficient means of all this liquidity that could be tapped into for low slippage transactions amongst all these different assets. But the launch of Curve USD might actually end up bolstering that all these different routings that you can do between different token pairs at incredibly low cost, still with very low slippage, which could allow Curve, in my estimation, to gain massive footing within this within its attempts to kind of corner this market.
No, that's
Interesting.
awesome.
So, well, I kind of forgot to ask this in the beginning. For people who may not know, I mean, I was kind of assuming it's DeFi top signal. So most people are already in DeFi and know Curve. But for those that don't, what's Curve?
Yeah, great question. So Curve launched before I even started kind of playing around with DeFi. It's maybe 3+ years old at this point, and initially got its start when Michael Egorov, who's the founder, he's the absolute math genius who's had all the kind of revolutionary ideas that have made Curve the success it is today. He was really active in DeFi. He's also a whale, so he happens to really understand the problems that come when you trade and use DeFi. And at the time, it was like Uniswap was kind of there with their V1 model, and he kind of looked at it and said, "This isn't very good. I can do a lot better." In particular, he focused on trades between stablecoins, which, if you're outside DeFi like I was, you might not understand why that's a business, right? You might say, "Who needs to trade a dollar for a dollar?" And in doing so, like, why is that a big business? But as it turns out, like as we all know now, stablecoins are absolutely central to all of DeFi. There's been a huge explosion of the different kinds of stablecoins. All of them have like these slightly different use cases. And as a result, there's tremendous demand to move a dollar from Tether to USDC or a USDC to an LUSD, etc. So as there's kind of more and more stablecoins that get created, he created a formula which allowed for incredibly efficient trading of stablecoins, much better so than the Uniswap algorithm, which was at the time more focused on volatile pairings, was able to allow. And as such, it was able to quickly kind of dominate this market for stablecoins. And then from there, Curve launched V2, which was its foray into allowing for trading of volatile asset pairs. And I also think that it happens to be a particularly underappreciated innovation within DeFi. So I'm not sure where exactly you want to go or dive into with any of that, if any.
Yeah, I actually do want to talk about the formula itself. What's the biggest difference between that formula? Well, I mean, I guess that there is a big difference between V2, but more so with concentrated liquidity. If people are able to create concentrated liquidity on Uniswap, is that formula much different than the Curve? Not Curve itself, but like the impermanent loss curve that is on a concentrated liquidity pair. Like I've seen your formula in action, especially with the USDC DPEG. The prices actually weren't horrible when there was like 2% or 2.2% of the pool composing of Tether, and the rest of it was mainly USDC and DAI. I mean, it was trading at like what was it, 93 or 94 cents when it was at that percentage. So it was actually pretty good. So that's kind of the main question there.
Right. And at this point, my small brain's been able to wrap my head around that V1 formula, which basically you can think of it as like two axes with two different coins. You can look at it as if it was a complete straight line, that would basically mean that every time you were trading coins, like the price would basically like move along that line. Or you could look at it as a curve where, which is much more like the Uniswap X times Y equals K, and that will move the price kind of more significantly. So a straight line is kind of best for stable coins because you don't want the price to be moving drastically, because you generally trust if the coin is a good pay mechanism, it's going to like be able to restore. So that means that where if you're using the kind of curve of Uniswap, the price might change so drastically it's not very useful for trading stable coins. But with the more, if the is closer to a straight line, then it's essentially holding its value at $1, even at points of extreme imbalance. But of course, you can't have it go all the way like that, because if it gets too imbalanced, then then essentially like you run out of liquidity. People just take the last dollar out of the pool. So as the pool does get to kind of the edge case, you do want to eventually have it move to a curve so it starts changing the price. So essentially what the curve stable swap invariant is kind of like halfway between a line and a curve. So it's
got it.
As it approaches zero, it has these kind of like hyperbolic asymptotes. But for kind of a normal range liquidity within it, it more resembles a straight line. And then there's one factor called the A parameter, which basically defines how curvy that curve is. So if it's a very volatile asset, then it'll look closer to like a full curve. If it's like the free pool where the assets have really strong backing, then that's going to basically resemble a straight line all the way up to like 95% imbalance before it starts seeing the price moving.
Got it. So I envision it something like a sidewalk, where you have to take the stairs on at the beginning, and at the end you also have stairs on the way up. So I guess in between that time, it's on the flat level of the sidewalk. The trading experience will be pretty close to par.
Versus like a constant like ramp.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which would be more gradual, but it's kind of always changing. That's actually a really good analogy.
So how do, I know it really depegs and whatnot really doesn't affect Curve much at all. You guys just are a liquidity pool. But I'm kind of curious, what was your team doing, or how was it with the UST depeg in the height of the bull market?
Yeah, so the UST depeg was it was just a sad event, I think, for everyone in all of cryptocurrency. I mean, in particular, like the thing that is kind of crazy about it is like here in the United States, like it's sort of unthinkable that Ethereum would disappear. It's like the blue chip brand. Like if some random side chain you've never heard of disappears, so what? Like you shouldn't have been playing your money there. But it's kind of tough to forget that in lots of parts of the world, like that's what Terra Luna was. Like it was like within Korea, like everyone just assumed it's a top 10 project. It's backed by all these VCs. It's too big to fail. And they just kind of played on it the way we play on Ethereum, and then it just disappeared overnight and they lost everything. And I don't think we realized how easily that could happen to Ethereum. Like we could all just see all of our net worth on chain disappear overnight if something goes horribly wrong. So like that was a really sad event. Now, when there's a fair like silver lining for Curve, which is that anytime there's massive amounts of trades, Curve does end up like printing a lot of fees. So it's kind of common when you see these massive market nukes for the Curve Finance official account to be sitting there kind of like almost gloating about how big a volume it has.
Yeah, who runs that? It's funny.
No, I can't be too sure, but I'm pretty sure it's Mitch running that. And it's actually, I find it super
Okay.
reassuring because it kind of like when I see Mitch gloating, it kind of reminds me that everything's going to be okay. If it was not gloating, then I might start be like, then I'd start panicking. But so I don't exactly remember the case with Terra as far as fees, but presuming that, so basically two things could happen. If the pool is collecting fees in UST, then Curve collected a lot of UST that ended up worthless. Or if it was collecting fees and got them into 3 Curve in time, then it actually probably made a fair amount of money on the FUD. But
So
don't think it made a lot of money off that one.
I have a question about the risk side of this, because given what's been going on in the current markets, and this is kind of like a couple questions within this question, but number one, just kind of off the top, how often do you guys kind of keep your finger on the pulse with what's current in the crypto world?
Yeah,
Like
it's a
any of the
great
news?
question.
Yeah.
It's a great question. So I follow it pretty closely. The issue that you really have with okay, so Curve is like amongst all the projects that exist, Curve is amongst the most decentralized. And by that, like if like I mentioned that Charlie, Michael, and Ben are all in Switzerland. If an asteroid obliterated Switzerland tomorrow, Curve would still keep functioning. There would still be like a couple of things that might be kind of iffy, but basically like their share of Curve would just not be owned by anybody. But the Curve protocol itself is still very decentralized. So by that I mean that the all these parameters, like that A parameter for V1 pools and a few
Mhm.
other parameters that govern the kind of volatile asset V2 pools, those can be changed at the behest of the DAO. So the DAO is consisting of anyone who's locked Curve as VECRV and is voting in these initiatives, and that's what can cause the community to like look at it and say, "Hey, this US Terra thing looks like it might not be redeemable. Maybe instead of like the straight line, maybe we should change the A factor so it's more of a curve, so that LPs are less likely to kind of be at risk." So there's a frequent amount of governance votes that happen as people are monitoring the news in the community and bubbling up suggestions. And in order to kind of bolster that, the Curve Grants Council funded the Llama Risk Team, which is a bunch of independent researchers as well as a few people within the Curve ecosystem also sit in on it. And they're actually just like writing up these really detailed reports on different protocols, on the different risk factors, giving recommendations on if they should receive gauges to receive the Curve rewards, or if they think that there's some risk factor at play that causes them to be in need of having their gauge pulled. So basically, like the kind of risk element of this is really important to Curve, but in this kind of decentralized fashion, it's been pushed out towards the community.
Yeah, that's really good, because then that is more so a preventative action than a reactive. Then that's a solid plan. But
Yeah.
okay, so there's been obviously what's been going on with Binance, and over the last year we had all these falls of Terra and FTX. So I was sitting in one of the spaces with Mario, and he had like a bunch of folks on there. Mario Nawfal. I'm not sure if you've
Mhm.
been listening to any of these spaces, but I hop in there from time to time. But I hopped in yesterday for about 20 minutes or 30 minutes or so, and there was some guy on there that was named Andrew. There's a lot of folks that I follow, but Andrew kind of spoke up and said, "Hey, I have a lot of friends at the SEC who are friends, and they mingle with the folks over at the CFTC, and so they were saying that once Binance is done, right? Because what CZ has been accused of, and I guess there's an ongoing investigation of that and charges to follow. They did say, and this is the Andrew. He did say something with guys. I'm sure you guys know the next domino that's going to fall. Any guesses? And everyone kind of stayed silent. He said, "Well, it's Tether." So given that Tether has had so many FUD events, right, over its life cycle, wondering, you might have answered this already, right? But what if Tether fails? Like, what's DeFi going to be? And this is like a broader question, maybe not so much CRV, but and for Curve, but what are your thoughts on Tether? What if it just completely goes to zero? You know, where do you see the landscape kind of turning to?
It's possible. I'd say it's a real risk that everyone should be aware of, and that kind of all of DeFi is incredibly risky. And I don't know if you issued these disclaimers, nothing on this is financial advice, etc. But I do think that it's not financial advice, but like practical advice that you should only be playing in DeFi if it's money that you're expecting you're going to lose. Because we've seen that play out over the past year or two, that is actually what's happened, is like pretty much everyone who's had money in this space has gotten wrecked. So if
Why are we still here?
We actually like this bear market is a little bit cleansing or like purifying in some way for DeFi, in my opinion, in that it's not the worst thing in the world to have this like massive drawdown in volume and all these institutions and pillars that previously looked unshakable, to see them fall. In that, like, DeFi would have been much more resilient if it had been built off of the backs of decentralized stablecoins like LUSD, hypothetically a Curve.FI W. If we got into a universe where Tether failed, let's say USDC has severe restrictions placed upon it, so it can't interact with Ethereum mainnet, we basically see DeFi 1.0 as we knew it no longer exist. But from its ashes, you can envision a much more decentralized DeFi 2.0 emerging. And the more resilient DeFi 2.0 would be difficult to kill in that it would presumably be using stablecoins that were much more decentralized. So the fall of Tether would be very painful to myself. Like, I have a lot of net worth on Ethereum. That would probably go to zero. So if Tether does fail, that would be an existential crisis for DeFi, yes. But if you look at the kind of longer term 30,000 foot view, it might be the dose of medicine that the space needs to take decentralization more seriously. And mind you, I don't actually think Tether will fail.
Yeah, I have no idea where Tether's going to go, because it's been standing the test of time. Like, it's one of those things where it just will not go away. And it's funny because there's a correlation with this. So every single time that there's any Tether FUD in the markets, you see just Tether coming out shiny and bright, and it's unaffected.
I think it has
right?
to do with the Bitcoiners, though. Just kind of making a point, like any of the diehard Bitcoiners or any of the OG Bitcoiners, they don't want Tether to fail, because Tether failing is basically going to wreck Bitcoin, because most of the trading pairs for Bitcoin are in USDT, and most of the volume is done through that.
Yeah, it's tough. So I just because Tether has survived so often in the past, I'm kind of inclined to think it's going to survive going forward. And I think that the same with Binance, because I think Binance has huge cash reserves. They're pretty smart. And at the end of the day, they have kind of access to jurisdictions outside the United States in a period where the United States, it's tough to get a good read on it, but it seems like the United States is geopolitical influence is kind of coming under attack a little bit. And it's going to be kind of a question of if the United States has the clout to take down Binance or not.
Yeah, I think it's mainly just to CZ. I don't think Binance as an entity. I'm not sure because there's a lot of things that need to come up that need to come up to the surface right now. But it's just that they wanted to kind of bring in and extradite CZ at this point, just to bring him in to talk to him. And but I mean, he's being accused of fraud, so I don't I don't know where that's going to go. Potentially the end of CZ? Question mark.
Yeah, we'll see. I think that he's proven as resilient as Tether in the past, so we'll just have to wait and see.
CZ is Tether, stablecoin.
That's true. We have no idea what we're talking about here.
Yeah. One question for you, Curve.Cap. So in regards to, you kind of made a mention, Tether going to zero, if, basically you keep some of your funds on chain, and I'm sure a lot of the viewers do, and I do as well. If there is, or not if, but in regards to how you play in DeFi or use DeFi, are you mainly just a Curve maxi, or do you like to see what else is out there, play around with other DeFi protocols and see what's going on?
So I do play with other DeFi protocols. I And yeah, I'm not even though I'm a Curve maximalist, I'm not 100% a Curve loyalist. I do keep a fair amount of my money in Curve. Like the Curve is in the token, as well as I keep a fair amount of like pools like for other assets in Curve pools, which I farm on Curve and then give to Convex for the rewards. But like the only thing I can come to, because I've lived through some very crazy times in my life, but the past 2 years have been like by far some of the craziest. And in really insane times like these, the only advice that I can kind of get or follow is to just keep my money in as many different like small diversified like buckets as possible, right? Like I don't trust banks, and I don't trust that on-chain assets are going to be there tomorrow. So the best I can do is just kind of like parcel them up, keep a little bit in one bank, and a little bit in another bank, a little bit in Coinbase, a little bit on-chain, a little bit in Curve pools, a little bit elsewhere, and like other protocols. And that's mostly been good for me in that like I've somehow managed to avoid heavy losses, despite the past few years wrecking a lot of people. Other than a small amount that I put in Bancor, I've managed to like actually keep pretty safe.
Yeah, I remember Bancor. For those who didn't know, they had like a issue. I can't remember. I think it had to do with the UST, which caused the issue. But basically, the Bancor token got printed to an oblivion, and all of the token pairs basically have some routing through the BNT token itself, and basically just diluted everyone. So a lot of people received some crazy and permanent loss.
It was a little obnoxious because they really marketed themselves heavily as no impermanent loss, like
Yeah,
no
I know.
single-sided staking, and then a lot of people that I considered trustworthy basically had kind of vouched for it. So I was like, okay, I'll play around a little bit, and maybe they'll make us right in the end. We'll have
Nope.
to see. I doubt it, but
we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, I
but
was just kind of
there's like a
messing
sliver
around.
of hope. There's a sliver of hope there, but other than that one, like most of the assets, other than the fact that like everything went down in price 90%, like I still have the same quantity of tokens, which is what I care more about.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, are there any DeFi projects in particular that you're looking at that you think are pretty disruptive or think will have a bright future? Obviously, besides Curve, but yeah.
Yeah, that's so this is where I kind of have the blinders on because I mostly just kind of pay attention to projects like in and around the Curve ecosystem. Um, so I'm following a lot of the projects like within the Curve ecosystem as they're launching and kind of like uh, building out what I think are some pretty innovative applications. But outside the Curve ecosystem, I don't quite like know as much. Like I kind of have to rely on other people in my network, and usually it's just like I'm ambiently seeing them talking about all sorts of cool things on like Twitter. And I'm fairly poor, so I don't have money and resources to play in all of them, unfortunately. So it's like maybe every couple of months I can like be like, all right, let me like try and put a little money into something like this, or let me try and like buy a little bit of that and see what happens. But as far as
have
like,
you played around in like other L1s and L2s?
so mostly like a little bit on Arbitrum. So I like was pretty interested in what they were doing with DopeX there.
Hmm.
Like a year or so ago, 2 years ago, I forget, like maybe probably a year and a half, they were launching. And I wanted to like follow that a little closer. So I like started diving into the DopeX ecosystem just a bit to see. And I still do think that like options on chain can be a killer use case for DeFi. And I mostly blame the bear market for not really taking off. But the fact of the matter is, like, it's really tough for new protocols to launch at the moment. Like, we're seeing a period where liquidity is being drained out of DeFi. We're still seeing traditional finance undergoing a slow motion collapse. Like uh, the a lot of the VCs that were investing heavily into DeFi and cryptocurrency like are still getting like wrecked and going through the fallout and contagion from Three Arrows Capital, FTX, all these things. So it's just like a really rough time for people to be launching anything. Um, so those who do like I have such amazing respect for, but it's there's not a lot that can be done on chain necessarily at the moment in launch that's going to like reverse the bear market just from any one protocol or anything.
Yeah, and that's why
Got
it's
it.
really tough when it gets to, when we're talking about narratives, right? Because the narratives really, the underlying meaning of that is that, all right, well, where's the money shifting to, right? And
Yeah.
it was first AI, okay, everyone takes profits off there, right there, and then they move over to something else. And the China narrative, they go into, LSDs, and where is the next narrative? And that's kind of, in my opinion, when it comes to narratives, it's kind of, um, it's kind of annoying to say because we want to build a DeFi community where people trust their favorite protocols. So the idea is that people shouldn't be moving over to narratives and moving, taking profits. They should really trust and find joy that they're utilizing their favorite protocols. And I'm not saying to keep your money there, but it's the trading aspect. It comes narrative is like to me is more so trading, and you're not really caring about the project, so to speak, right? And like they're the devs that are behind these projects building. I don't know. I find that the narratives it's just another trading idea, moving on to the next idea, move on to the next. So it's not really like, okay, we believe in DeFi, we love DeFi. It's more so, hey, where's the money shifting to? So I find little
Yeah.
frustration just kind of listening to people talk about these narratives and what's the next one, right? Because that really means that,
Profit maxis.
right? Exactly.
Well, yeah. Well, humans are hardwired for narratives, right? Like if you look at how our brains operate, like we don't cling to facts and figures, we cling to stories. So like the stories and narratives are always going to be more powerful than they actually probably should be because our brains work on narratives, but life usually doesn't. But if you have to take a narrative now, it's a survival narrative, right? Like
Yes.
it just
Yeah.
stay alive. If you can manage to stay alive and unscraped for the next who knows how long, like we have to assume that like at some point the Fed turns around and starts printing money, and I imagine crypto is going to be among the first to pump when it does. But that could be 6 months, a year, 2 years. So if you could just survive for the next 2 years, go outside. It's sunny out. It's spring. Get some sunshine. Take a bike ride. Go for a long run. Don't worry about your
Speaking
bag.
of stay alive, what are your thoughts on Curve? Do you think there's a chance that it goes down, or that's not a doubt in your mind that it's going
Oh,
to be one of the
the price is
dominant
going to go
protocols?
down.
Like, as in, like, someone else takes market share and they lose traction, similar to something like Solidly on Phantom.
Got it. So I do think that there is like more people launching AMMs, and I welcome it to be honest, because I think that Uniswap got better when Curve emerged to challenge it, and I think Curve gets better when new protocols emerge to challenge it. Like one of the things that has been kind of eye opening for me to see is like I think Curve V2 pools are like I said earlier, like I think massively underappreciated in terms of kind of what they do and how they operate and how they can be used to bootstrap liquidity. But then when you talk to protocols that are trying to launch like a new token offering, they they look at Curve V2 and then they say that's interesting, and maybe we'll do that when we hit scale. But for a launch event, we want to go to Balancer. And you say, well, why is that? And they Balancer has these kind of innovative 99.2 or 99.1 or 98.2 pools, where you can essentially what that means is that like you can add liquidity to it, and it's done in such a like massively imbalanced fashion that for all these token launches, new token launches, people go to the whatever liquidity source available, drain it, try and get as much like real token out as they can. Like let's say Arbitrum. If there's an Arbitrum ETH pool, because of the fact that it's like so massively imbalanced though, and the weights are set to 98.2, it means that you could dump millions of dollars worth of Arbitrum into the pool without moving the price much. So when I first heard about this, like it didn't quite make sense. Like it's like an illiquid liquidity pool. But then from this concept of like how do you like have this launch event, it kind of made a bit more sense. Like it's like, oh, okay, so it's like a way of like trying to like have the protocol level manipulate the token price, and it's pretty useful. So like because like continuing innovation in DeFi, like I think that's a good thing because it means that like now there's like an extra set of tools for people who like want to play with the AMM space, and like maybe Curve could launch a like like a competing version of its V2 pool with like very specific parameters to try and compete, but it forces Curve to up its game, right?
So what's the general criteria that where it checks the box for moving on to another like L1 or L2? Like what's the check mark where, hey, this is it. This layer 1, this layer 2 is, we want to make sure that we will bring Curve to that chain.
So that's definitely not a question for me. The kind of upper level team is like more focused on that. But I would say
Okay.
like the easiest thing is if it's EVM compatible straight out of the box, then it's kind of like plug and play. If it's like, you have to port it to Rust or something, it's probably not going to happen unless there's like significant incentive for it to happen.
Gotcha. So no Aptos, no Solana. Gotcha.
No, I mean I think the big ones would be like Binance Smart Chain would be the second largest or third largest chain. I forget. I haven't checked the rankings. Tron would be a big one. Tron actually is EVM compatible, so I'm not sure why that one hasn't been launched.
Gotcha. Are you so any idea with maybe Curve getting into NFTs? This might be a dumb question. I'm sorry to ask that, but I'm curious, right? Because there's a bunch of other projects right now that are actually doing some really fun things when it comes to NFTs based on, I know that, Drake, you can hop in here if you want to when we talk about Equalizer, right? So it's basically an AMM that's on Phantom. And the idea is that they have a bunch of these NFTs that have tokens that are tied to it based on like, maturity timeframes and all that. So any idea where if that's going to be like a somewhat of an initiative?
Yeah, so
So
some back information on what Abs is talking about is they're basically locked VE positions, so similar to Curve, but they're liquid in the form of an NFT, so you can sell these NFTs. Does that make sense?
yeah, interesting. So I I would be willing to bet that Curve never directly gets into NFTs. The team is just not terribly interested in NFTs.
Rightfully
No,
And
so.
no, 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 no,
I got
not
you.
NFTs. They're basically, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Abs, if you're going at this, but I think what he was meaning is liquid stake position. So similar to Convex, how Convex
Mhm.
has VL, or I think it's CVX, VLC, RV or something, but basically
Right,
the liquid locked version of Curve. This one is basically an NFT that represents your locked position. So almost like on Uniswap, when you provide liquidity on Uniswap V3, you get an NFT. It's the same thing
right.
in this aspect. When you lock your tokens, they're still locked, but you have this vote locked NFT to where you can sell this to other users. So if I locked in 1,000 Curve tokens, I can sell that NFT to someone, but they have to be willing to buy 1,000 Curve tokens that are locked.
Right. So, if you're talking about just like an ERC 721 standard, which is
That's
just
exactly right. That's exactly
yeah,
right.
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
Like that can and I think even has in some particular cases been utilized by Curve. But it's not super central to the tokenomics. But if you're asking about like the NFT culture of like board apes and stuff like that, that's not
No.
ever going to be a priority.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, that's exactly right, Drake. Thanks for explaining. I should have went a little bit more deeper dive on that. But it's exactly right. Selling your NFT version of like the locked tokens.
Right, and that's pretty common. Like Chicken Bonds did a NFT just because like when you're talking about like tracking specific positions with a trackable ID, like a ERC 721 standard is pretty useful. I don't see Curve doing anything like massively like around like tokenomics of NFTs. Um, but you never know. Like it's probably gonna like depend on where the market looks or where the market goes.
So I do want to take a second here to shift to STX really quick. So I'm not sure if you've heard of Stacks at all. And I know that Drake,
I have
you
a small
mentioned this
bag.
earlier. What's that?
I have a small bag of stacks.
Nice, nice. So you obviously know of like the DeFi, basically the ecosystem, what it looks like at this moment in time. Yes, it's only about 4 to 5 different protocols that are built on it currently, but with the future upgrades of having the the current transactions settling after what 10 to 30 minutes, I think currently of these transactions basically what am I saying here? It's so when we put a transaction, it takes around 10 to 30 minutes at this moment in time. I'm not sure you're playing around in DeFi with stacks, but does this idea interest you? Because we have a bunch of BTC maxis out there, um, and the potential for this ecosystem to grow. Um, what is your take on BTC DeFi?
So I think I'm probably unique amongst like Ethereum people in that I'm super bullish on BTC DeFi. Um, I think it actually has the potential to be way bigger than Ethereum DeFi for a couple of reasons. The first is just that all the available liquidity sitting in the Bitcoin ecosystem, right? Like Bitcoin's market cap is over twice Ethereum's market cap at the moment. And there's all these BTC maxis just sitting around wanting to do something with it. And they haven't really had anywhere to put it. You have the Lightning Network, which is looking for a use case. And as soon as it can process like a huge amount of transactions. It kind of serves like Bitcoin L2 there. And then the best thing of all is Bitcoin doesn't need to like go through the painful learning curve of Ethereum DeFi. Like in Ethereum DeFi, we've had to like build all these apps from scratch. We've seen the bugs, we've seen the rough edges, we've seen the hacks. Bitcoin could just copy what works, put it right into their own like DeFi contracts, and have half a trillion in liquidity ready to flow into it like almost instantly. So I think Bitcoin DeFi is like you want to talk about narratives, like that could be a huge narrative. Now, the downside for Bitcoin is all the developers have fled to Ethereum. They don't really have like a nice user experience. Like they don't have anything quite as nice as MetaMask even. And MetaMask isn't even by far the best wallet. They don't have like Web3 plugins. They don't have all the kind of friendly tools that we've come to use in Ethereum. But they know what works in a DeFi, and they could just copy it and have a pretty killer situation going on for them.
Yeah, so I was looking at Alex Labs. I'm not sure if you've are currently playing in BTC DeFi, but we here at DeFi Top Signal we've talked about stacks for so many different episodes. We're very very bullish on it as well. So we appreciate your thumbs up here from a dev's perspective. But one thing to say about Alex tokens is that Alex Lab, if you just simply go on alexlab.co, if you kind of scroll down, you can see the investors on there, and I see a major investor in in Alex Lab, and I'm just going to say it's Gemini. Gemini is one of the big investors for Alex Lab. So being that it literally has around 90 or maybe 89% of the dominance in this on this chain. It's very interesting how Gemini is a major investor here, and I just noticed this just today, this morning.
Yeah, so that I mean, they're not dumb in this case if they're chasing this. Like there is, I think, tremendous opportunity. So we'll just have to see what emerges.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with that. I know it'll be interesting because, especially with the EVM chains, there's a ton of competition. There's really not much on Bitcoin. Another question I do have, just trying to bring it back to Curve, is Curve currently hiring? And if someone is looking for a position, how would one get that position? Or is it just kind of closed doors right now?
That's a good question. I haven't seen Curve like specifically like put out any like hiring requests, but I do think that they would be kind of willing to onboard people if they were like if the right developers came along. So I would say specifically if you are interested in becoming a Curve developer, by far the best thing that you should do is like learn and show off some Viper. So Viper, for those who aren't aware, is like a more Pythonic alternative to Solidity. Solidity is what most smart contracts are based on. They have a lot of templates, so it's like really easy for new developers to pick up. Like go to OpenZeppelin, download the template for like an ERC20 token, and make a few changes and launch it. Viper is a number of advantages. Some of them are like pretty useful for things like the more advanced math that Mitch has to do for things like Curve.USD and Curve.V2 pools. But some of it is just the readability when you get into these complex things. Like, you don't have like these like really complex blocks of code, just raw bytecode being injected that you have to do in Solidity in some cases. They put a focus on readability, as well as like making it so that new users can't make errors. And then it also, like, just because the compiler happens to be so screamingly efficient, it ends up being more efficient for gas costs, particularly with deployment of contracts, but also with like a lot of kind of routine transactions. So there's a lot of advantages to building in Viper, particularly for DeFi apps, where gas golfing could actually make or break your protocol. It's actually kind of a flaw of some of the Curve.V2 contracts. Is the first version were too gas inefficient, so they're being rewritten to be more gas efficient. So that being said, like, if you're a new developer looking to kind of get on Curve's radar, or Yearn, which is another protocol that's using a lot of Viper, then I would recommend just starting to noodle around the Viper Discord, talking with people, seeing what is like the biggest gaps in the space, and like start submitting some pull requests. And I think pretty quickly you could take that and apply to like Curve or anywhere and say, look what I built, hire me.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. I know a lot of times people are trying to ask where to get a position or where to get a job. The best thing to do is just show your skills and they just come to you. But yeah,
It's really true. Like, it's the easiest space to get hired in if you're actually talented. Like, it's so easy if you can actually point to a GitHub repository with some code in it.
so how did Curve approach you?
I approached Curve back then. They had put out a request for hiring. I was teaching class at the University of Washington on Solidity and Python, so I thought that it could be kind of a shoe-in. In particular, I was interested in writing tests. They because like smart contracts are immutable. If you're doing it right, you have to make sure your smart contracts work perfectly the first time you deploy them. And as a result, you need these massive and really comprehensive testing libraries. So I was hoping to get a job for Curve helping to write a lot of these tests. And I got hired for that. As I mentioned, I forced a colleague into a Zoom meeting my first week. Went downhill from there. I almost got fired, but I got reassigned within Curve to working on like more educational materials and out of the critical path.
Nice.
And 2 years later, you're still there. That's good. That's good news.
That's true. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we have a few more minutes left here. What? So you said that Curve is not interested in NFTs. This is one of our last topics that we kind of like talk about, and it's kind of fun. But are you interested in NFTs? Are you dabbling into that space? Are you observant of it?
A little bit. So I've launched a couple of side projects that have dabbled within NFTs. Last year, around the time that the crypto was under attack, then through the infrastructure bill, me and some people launched a Pack DAO, which was a attempt to build a DAO that would be focused on sort of on-chain activism, like supplementing a lot of the offline activism that a lot of like the groups like Blockchain Association and whatnot do in DC. We wanted to like try and harness people within the NFT space. So we launched some NFTs. I spent like a year trying to get together one of our flagship. When we launched, we promised we would launch an on-chain congressional scorecard. It took like a year of development to do so. There's a tie-in NFT people could buy. And I guess I flew a little too close to the sun because right as I launched it, all the accounts that I have on Twitter that were pushing it got instantly like shadow banned. So I was unable to promote it. And as a result, like the NFT sale completely flopped. So that was like a bit of a oof moment. I also like it wasn't a complete loss because I was able to take a lot of the code from that and help out another really fun group for the NFT project, which is, to its credit, it's the largest Viper NFT to ever be launched, called NPCers. It's based on the NPC meme, but it kind of sort of reimagines the NPCers to be no coiners and people who are dumping on Bitcoin or Ethereum. They're the NPCs in the within the NPCer universe, and that's been a lot of fun. And within that, I've gotten a chance to kind of work on some more like innovative applications. Like we're working on some versions of wrapped tokens that could be used within like the Curve pool ecosystem. So through that, indirectly, I might be able to bring NFTs to Curve through this kind of backdoor route.
Wow, I had no idea you're into NFTs. That's awesome. Yeah, it's so interesting because I actually months ago, I was kind of dabbling into trying to learn how to code and if it was for me or anything like that. But a friend of mine suggested for me to get onto the cryptozombies.io, just to kind
Oh
of
yeah.
I remember that.
get my feet wet, just to kind of get and for those people who don't know what crypto zombies is, it's basically this lesson where it has a bunch of courses. It's like level by level kind of thing, and you kind of learn how to like the basics of solidity. And it's I got to the third lesson, and I said, "Well, I'm sorry, but this is not for me. I can't do it." It's I just get and like I don't know, my attention span for it was not at the peak as I would have
No,
hoped.
fair enough. It's not for everyone. I took the same tutorial, and that's where I learned to code Solidity in the first place. So if you are able to make it through, like that's a pretty good one. But yeah, it's probably for the best though. If you don't think you're like the right mindset for it, then the last thing you should be doing is deploying contracts on chain that will take people's money, because you'll probably have a mistake and someone else will take their money.
Yeah. And then years down, I would get in trouble for that because I rugged someone, and that's
Right.
that's not what
Right.
that's not me.
Yeah.
Wait, what? You
So
rugged someone?
No, no,
I'm
no.
kidding. I'm kidding. I'm
Erase,
kidding.
erase. Delete. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting, things that are happening in NFTs, and I honestly see there's a huge use case, when it comes to future, and not just owning a JPEG per se, but more so of like tickets or like concerts, and potentially maybe down the line, 10 years, 20 years from now, how long the government would take, but. I kind of see this going into government docs because obviously we want accountability and traceability, and but I see that's another conversation for another time, but I do see the use case and the utility down the line for NFTs in a big way.
yeah, so there's governments like America's that are trying to fight kind of the advent of new technology. There's going to be governments kind of more aligned with like the El Salvadors and Central African republics of the world that embrace it, and I know which group I'm betting is going to win.
Wait, say that one more time.
I basically think that there's kind of governments like the United States that are trying to fight progress in
Gotcha. Yeah,
cryptocurrency, and there are
that's right.
governments that will embrace it. And I think the latter group is the one that's going to be inordinately successful in the future.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah,
Completely
if you
agree with
try to shun innovation, it's not going to be good.
No, it
Basically, the
never
innovation will
works.
just go elsewhere. I know.
My
exactly.
my supposition is that there's never been a technology that's been stopped at a national border. And I've yet to hear of a good example of where just like a national border shut down like a particular technology from getting through. Like China still has an internet. It's like it is blocked through censorship technology, but that censorship technology itself gets exported and used here in the United States. Like all these technologies have a way of ignoring national borders and like subsuming the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think NFTs are just gonna it's definitely one of those things in crypto that's going to thrive. I think obviously DeFi is gonna completely explode. Um, you said earlier that you see BTC DeFi going off as well, and we agree with that. But yeah, I mean, I think we're coming up on the end of our time, and we appreciate so much about you coming on to one of our episodes here and talking to us about your thoughts from a dev's perspective and what's going on
Yeah.
with Curve, and
Can I
but yeah, we'll
quickly
definitely have you back for sure.
can I take a
If
minute to
you,
plug something
Oh
that
yeah,
absolutely.
please
you other
do.
folks just
In
launched the other
fact,
day?
give your channels and your Twitter and where can we learn more about you and follow you as well?
Well, if anyone wants to follow me, let's send everyone and get a huge bump from doing this podcast to the newest thing that me and some people have been working on. One thing we've noticed is that the state of cryptocurrency news is pretty bad. So this is how new people get into the space and they end up getting into these terrible rabbit holes. They just go on Twitter, see who's loudest, and usually it's Shiba or Hex or something. Not to knock those, I don't know a lot about those projects, but it seems like they have a lot of influencers and way less substance. And as a result, you get a huge surge of people towards the loudest projects, not the best projects. Meanwhile, Curve doesn't pay a penny on marketing. So yeah, and then the news covers where the information flows. So myself and a bunch of other people who are moderately well known in our particular niches of cryptocurrency and DeFi in particular are teaming up to launch a 24/7 headline news service focused on cryptocurrency, but really kind of delving down in this longer tail of the the side chains, the new DeFi protocols that aren't on the front page of CoinGecko, all the actual news that might be interesting to people getting in the markets that doesn't get heard. So we're calling it LNN, Leviathan News Network. And it's at the moment we're only launching a headline news service, so follow it at LNN_headlines, primarily on Telegram, but also on Twitter. And we do have a Discord, but the link is available from both the Twitter and the Telegram. So LNN_headlines.
Yeah, if you could shoot those over to me, I'll go ahead and add them to the description of the video so people can check those out.
That'd be great. Would really appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, we always end all of our podcasts with a wisdom one-liner. We're going to hit you guys with Proverbs chapter 12, verses 15. The way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. Always listen to advice. That's key. Curve.Cap, man, it was an honor to have you on. I appreciate you jumping on. We're going to have you on again sometime in the future so you can chat and give us some updates with Curve Protocol. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this video. Abs, thank you for jumping on as well, man. As always, love chatting back and forth with you. And guys, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and make sure you guys go over and follow Garrett as well as his new news channel. He is looking to start new news. Yeah. I'll go ahead and drop the links in the description below, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
All right, thanks, guys.